Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Clu'd Up Employers Club. This series of work covers deep dives into problem statements and themes we hear through our work, helping employers close their skills gaps inclusively. As always, I am your host and CEO and co-founder of Clue, Joseph Williams. For those who can't see me, I am a red-headed person with round glasses in a grey zip-up jumper, branded, of course. And today, as always, I am sitting in my hybrid greenhouse, kennel and home office. We are very excited about today's topic, building trust with hiring managers. It is something from a theoretical perspective, the concept of trust that I have been focused on for the vast majority of my career in different capacities, spending the earliest parts of my career finding ways to build trust in digital ecosystems for products, and latterly finding ways for hiring managers and hiring teams to trust that skills are as important as where you learned them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this recording today. The topic that we're going to be focusing on is really crucial in the current landscape. So with the Employment Rights Bill coming into being introduced to Parliament next month and probably coming into effect as soon as December, the risk and compliance wonderful universe portfolio of HR and talent acquisition teams is about to radically change. At the heart of that legislation, day one rights, and also themes around auditability and disproving discrimination claims, as opposed to having to prove the claim proving that they took place. This is something that's relatively unprecedented. We're already seeing the likes of TikTok videos emerging with giving tips on how to gamify these systems. And so what we really wanted to focus on today is kind of twofold. From a compliance perspective, what's coming, why we are focusing on hiring managers, particularly from a risk perspective. I think, although I think anyone watching this will probably know why we're focusing on hiring managers as a particular risk area. And then we are joined by the incredible Sharon Clues, one of my personal favorites in the in all things people related spaces, but a particular expert on behavioral transformation, of which we will need to be upskilling ourselves in if we are going to be successfully influencing. So we're going to be kicking off today with just a little bit of I'm going to try and keep it to 9 minutes. I have timed this quite rigorously, but just a little bit of an update on some recent data that we've captured at Clue, and a report looking at these new risks within the context of new legislation, and then leading into a discussion with Sharon. So if we're sitting comfortably, I will start sharing my screen and we can begin. Share. It's difficult for me to say share without going share. Share screen. There we go. Desktop one. Share. So, can you see the shared screen? Beautiful. So, crucial topic. How to build trust and credibility with hiring managers. Particularly timely, given that next month these new legislative changes will be introduced to Parliament. I've been saying for a while that as a technologist, I am particularly disappointed that the future of work will not actually be underpinned by technology. It will, however, be underpinned by regulation. Over the next 18 months, there are about a dozen pieces of new or updated employment-related regulation and legislation that are expected to be either introduced or coming into law. The upcoming UK Employment Rights Bill and amendments to the Equality Act are central to this, and will place new accountability on businesses to ensure fair, unbiased, and keyword auditable HR processes. The UK Employment Rights Bill will introduce day one employment rights. So as things currently stand, employment rights typically kick in after 2 years. That will be from day one as of the introduction of this bill and it being passed. Making it crucial to ensure accurate hiring decisions from the outset. So accuracy in talent acquisition being a particularly notable point here. The EU AI Act, classifying AI and recruitment as high risk, will also enforce stricter requirements of transparency and also bias mitigation, impacting the use of technology in hiring processes. And I think we all know where our biggest area of risk is when it comes to these. It is going to be our interviews. You know, the point at which systems and processes kind of fall out and we're just left on people doing what we asked them to do. I think it's probably fair to say that we all understand why. It is interviews that are of particular risk to us, safe space conversation and whatnot. It is our hiring managers. So for talent and HR teams, these legal challenges present a dual challenge. Lucky us. One, mitigating risk of non-compliance, but also demonstrating the value of consistent and fair hiring processes to our hiring managers. So in some of our recent research, we found that only 30% of companies have adapted their recruitment strategies to these incoming changes. Leaving many at risk of legal or financial repercussions. And with day one rights pending, this can become incredibly expensive very quickly. Just by way of some context here. So a discrimination claim, even relating to pregnancy, typically around £50,000 as a settlement fee for anyone that would fall into a legally classified, hate terminology myself, but vulnerable group. This can be in excess of £150,000. So if the right to claim that is from day one, as opposed to 2 years down the line, and we know that around 50% of people leave their job within the first 12 months, this could become very expensive very quickly, and nobody wants an angry CFO barking at them, asking why their budget has suddenly skyrocketed. So there is, however, an opportunity within this, and it lies within turning this need for kind of quite aggressive and rapid transformation into competitive advantage. We do this by aligning our hiring managers to create robust, compliant processes that not only reduce risk for them and for your function, but also improve their hiring outcomes. But what do we need to get them on side and consistent? We need to think about behavior change, hence the focus of today's discussion. So our latest research report reveals some pretty alarming statistics when it comes to hiring manager engagement and the risk that they carry in this new legislative landscape. 96% of hiring managers that were surveyed couldn't clearly define ultimately what they were looking for in a candidate, focusing not on skills, which would be consistent assessment, but past experiences and qualifications to determine talent. This is obviously a misalignment to what makes people good at their job, but is also leading to inconsistent evaluations and rampant biases within hiring decisions. And so we categorize this as high risk. It's going to be a couple of those. Promise not too many. Additionally, 78% of organizations are facing challenges in alignment of hiring managers to talent acquisition strategies, often resulting in fragmented and inconsistent hiring processes, which are leading to clearly demonstrable discrimination, which, of course, I'm sure we all understand is high risk. So I promise that's the last one. I just get very excited with camera animations. Although I say that, I don't know if I've accidentally added an animation at some point. I'll say something really poignant and then it will go pop. Or I'll do the peace sign and then confetti will start falling down thanks to Apple's new update. So standardization and auditability are key terms under this new legislation. So having this as an anchor to processes enables you and your organization to demonstrate fair evaluation and reduce the risk of discrimination claims under these new frameworks, especially as the precedent is looking like it will now shift from organizations from people suing organizations or raising claims against organizations to prove that they were discriminated against. It's now looking like precedent will be that organizations have to disprove that it didn't take place. So quite a significant shift there. Now, obviously, I have a vested interest in saying this. However, the reason we started building skills-based tooling 4 years ago, so long before the zeitgeist, and back when we were being told that we were foolish for starting to even think that we could start people focusing on anything other than experience when hiring, was because it is the best way of getting hiring managers aligned and structured around a consistent approach. And because this approach not only ensures greater accountability and greater compliance in the process, but it also enables operational efficiencies that advance business goals. So what we're talking about here is demonstrable proof that each person that is joining an organization is the right person for that job, mitigating things like tokenism, and also proving that cognitive dissonance and diversity are drivers of business outcomes. I won't say sorry, McKinsey, but now we have science-based proof. Not circumstantial proof that diversity actually does drive business outcomes. So Clu's research has also found that organizations with strong alignment between TA and hiring managers are 2.5 times more likely to achieve D&I goals. So when hiring managers understand and apply the same criteria across candidates, it ensures that each applicant is assessed fairly and consistently. This not only protects the company from legal risks, but also improves the quality of hires, reducing turnover and increasing team performance, which is what everybody wants, right? I mean, ultimately, we are talking about building higher performing teams because this makes them look good. And people want to go to sleep at night thinking, yeah, my team's great. Not many people go to sleep at night worrying how inclusive or how much bias they've mitigated that day. But performance really is such a strong anchor point. It makes them happy, and you probably get where I'm going with this now. So research indicates that hiring managers' decision-making is heavily influenced by cognitive biases, of course, but also a deep desire for efficiency, as surprising as that may be to some. They often rely on heuristic shortcuts, such as focusing on fit, or using prior roles as a proxy for skills, not because of an intent for bias, but because of a disposition for quick, risk-mitigated decision-making. Despite this, data from the Society of HR Management also found that when it comes to hiring specifically, 72% of hiring managers rely or admit to relying on gut feeling when making hiring decisions. So hiring managers want to make decisions and are predisposed to make decisions based on risk management. However, when it explicitly comes to hiring, they are relying on gut. So there is a paradigm disconnect. This does create this paradigm disconnect that almost always leads to subjective decisions that are inconsistent with organizational goals, hiring the right person, and increasingly compliance. So alongside making decisions based on efficiency, process optimization, and risk management, hiring managers are also motivated by impression and reputation. So Gartner did a study where they found that 84% of hiring managers indicate that they are more concerned about making a bad hire than they are about making a good one. They will look to fill roles quickly and effectively, but also want to build teams that look good internally and externally. So default to what they understand is the best, as opposed to it, or actually, I guess, regardless of whether it is the best or not, as the case may be. So understanding these drivers is essential when we are building trust. To engage hiring managers and to gain their buy-in for these consistent and compliant processes, which particularly as a talent acquisition function are really fundamental to financial risk mitigation and also to kind of compliance and broader risk mitigation. If we're looking at any system or process that's underpinned by AI, the fines for bias are going to be greater than GDPR, but will have as much scrutiny on recruitment as a function as GDPR did. So a huge amount of risk attributed there. To engage them and get their buy-in for consistent and compliant processes, we need to align our goals to their motivations. So some of the strategies that we employ are built into the behavioral psychology nudges of our product, and ones that work are the emphasis on efficiency. So showing how structured skills-based processes can actually streamline hiring, reducing time to fill, time to activation, and improving the quality of hire. Highlighting accountability. So using data to demonstrate how consistent processes reduced hiring mistakes and make them look better. And then reputational referencing, so supporting reputational development, positioning compliance and fair hiring as a way to enhance their professional reputation, making them champions of building high-performing teams and demonstrating that they are actively focused on high performance as an outcome of recruitment, and putting that into practice. So a few points here. I said I'll try for 9 minutes, and I know I'm at 12, so I'll be quick. So demonstrating cost of non-compliance. So if you cannot use reputation, risk mitigation, and efficiency as anchors, we always have the benefit now of being able to fall back on something that is indicative of not wanting to annoy a CFO, because you right there, Mr. or Mrs. or sensible enough to have navigated past gender norms, hiring manager, regular updates on these legal requirements and making sure that the implications are clearly understood by your hiring managers, documented, standardized processes, documentation. Keep on talking about it at the moment with organizations we're working with. Most organizations seem to not have documented processes with also these accountability measures. So what happens if you are not compliant? This needs to be very clear and circulated around an organization before these laws come into play. So standardizing these frameworks, implementing consistency and skills-focused approaches to interview creation, to role creation. This just means that we have this track record of from start to finish of a process, and then once someone enters into the organization, of what it is that we have wanted, what it is that we expect them to be able to do, and what it is that we have verified that they can do, or the gap between what we need them to do and where they are at the moment as they enter the organization. Particularly when we're looking at disproving bias, if we can show that effectively across people that are coming into the organization, massively useful tool. And then finally, just on feedback loops. So one of the things that I observe and recall from my time in-house is the process kind of starting and finishing, and kind of like the interception points being very transactional. The value of feedback and asking for feedback and making people feel like their feedback matters goes an incredibly long way with behavior change with our hiring managers. Fostering that collaborative culture and building co-intelligence with them particularly is a dividend that is consistently delivering. So changing legal landscape requires us to elevate partnership with hiring managers, co-intelligence underpinning it. Building trust and credibility is not just about being liked, it is about creating fair, consistent, and defensible hiring processes that stand up to scrutiny, auditability. By aligning with hiring managers and implementing structured, focused processes that are standardized, we can not only mitigate legal risks, but also drive better hiring outcomes that support your organization's long-term success. This means we will get ultimately a happier hiring manager, but critically, given the risk associated to these changes, significantly happier CFOs. Who doesn't need to have a happy CFO in their life? And so with that, talking about behavior change, I would love to stop sharing my screen if I work out how to do that. Very good. And call into view behavior, transformation, people, change expert guru and one of the best people in my life, Sharon Clues. Sharon, thanks for joining us today. How's it going?
You're very welcome. Thank you, Joseph.
Would you like to start with a little bit of an introduction to yourself and a visual description for those that can't see you?
Absolutely. So apart from all of the lovely things that Joseph has said, what I actually do for work is usually transformational coaching, but I also run quite a lot of leadership development programs for some large corporates. I do transformational coaching for corporate clients. I do some consulting on thought partnering on all of these big kind of issues that we're going to talk about today. And yeah, leadership is my place of comfort, I think. And I do that with primarily a kind and compassionate nature in mind. So that's kind of what I do. To describe myself, this is quite funny. So I am a middle-aged white woman with a tan and curly hair, currently pulled back, big red lipstick, big red and pink earrings, and a white top, sleeveless top, I'll say. How's that?
Thank you.
Did that paint that picture?
Picture painted perfectly.
You're welcome.
Very good. So, Sharon, let's jump in and starting with the big T word, trust. A very contextual word within business context. Means a million and one different things to different people, but arguably one of the things that is least present in the working world. In order to get people moving with us in a sense of kind of travel, a sense of kind of consistent direction, it has to be achievable. We know it is achievable, but are there consistent ingredients to it?
Yeah, I believe they are. And I love that Joseph asks me this question because my shifting of trust actually came because of a conversation that I had with him a long time ago. So yes, there are many consistent ingredients, I think. I think the biggest one is listening. And I mean active listening, not just a kind of listen. But I also think vulnerability is a really big part of building trust. And when I talk about vulnerabilities, I'm talking about sharing vulnerabilities to do things like build rapport, to build trust, to make that connection with people, but doing that authentically and honestly as well. And part of the consistent number of ingredients is actually consistency, that we act the same way all the time in all of the conversations that we have. And I think that part of the biggest ingredient is actually self-trust. So the latest research on things like imposter syndrome says that 82% of us have imposter syndrome. And I say us because, we're all guilty of it. I certainly am and have been in the past. And self-trust, being actually able to believe in ourselves and stand in that area of confidence without thinking we're bragging or without thinking we're being terrible and, showing off. Being able to trust ourselves is probably the biggest start to that. But things like, and Frances Frey, who does a great TED talk, if anyone wants to look up trust she was the ex-CEO of Uber. She talks about authenticity, empathy, and logic as being the kind of three pillars of the trust triangle. And authenticity around, I experience the real you, whatever that is. Empathy, I actually believe that you care about me and you care about, what's happening to me in the process. And also the logic part, which is I actually have faith in your ability and your judgment. I am going to let it go and just believe in a way what it is that you have to say. So yeah, I think there's a lot of consistencies. And I do think they're like achievable skills,
Trust is a smorgasbord.
Oh, completely. That's right. One of my least favorite, things is go up to the buffet and take your choice.
Yeah, quite. With a massive wheel of active listening in the middle of it, by the sounds of things. I think the interesting part around that is that so it's active listening, obviously being an active, but it's a passive role in a dynamic. So creating space for other people as opposed to dominating it
Yeah.
is a large part of that key.
Completely. And that is creating that psychological safety. You know, when we are leading a team, we want the people to feel safe enough to make a mistake or to come to us with a suggestion or to just not feel comfortable on a particular day or to be their regular neurodivergent selves, for example, or, you know, anything that shows up. We as leaders need to be able to carry all of that for our team and provide that space.
I agree with everything you said, apart from normal neurodivergent self. It's not a feeling I can ever relate to having.
There's no such thing as normal.
No, distinctly not normal is I think the reality that I inhabit there. With go on.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think there is any such thing as normal. And then the sooner we walk away from that area and give everybody a validation that we all think differently, then the conversation will become bigger and richer.
So curveball question then. Let's go. So consistency is one of the ingredients of trust, yet it's actually quite a difficult thing to expect of somebody, particularly when we are all these complex emotional beings. And particularly in a time at work where relationships are strained. You know, remote is a great thing for so many reasons, but the way in which we connect and integrate and react with our teams is very different. It's a paradigm level difference that we arguably aren't good at regulating as people. And on top of that, the macro environment we find ourselves in is so it's as inconsistent as a British summer. So how does one strive for that kind of consistency when it seems almost impossible to do so in this environment, particularly if you're, you know, a different thinker?
For me, it's about solidifying. Well, for me, it's about solidifying self. You know, I have to be strong in the fact that I consistently treat people in a kind, compassionate manner.
Understood. So the point around consistency isn't necessarily about it's understanding that your consistency could be telling people that this, you know, this may come across as inconsistent, or
Yeah,
might be interpreted as inconsistent. Like that. It's okay. It's thematic. Understood. Thanks for clarifying that. Useful for me. Throughout your career, when you were kind of heading up MD and kind of leading development functions and the like, getting hiring managers to adopt new ways of working in what you're doing now, getting hiring managers to think and behave in certain ways is key. It's a constant. What's worked, but also, and I think most importantly, what never works.
all right, I'll start with the easy question. What works?
Yes.
For me, it's about really very clearly having a very defined purpose and vision. So being able to lead yourself, your people, your team to, you know, this is the end goal. This is what it looks like. This is what we want to achieve. So that to me, you know, really strives to align people into the same kind of level of thinking. And again, listening, understanding, being empathetic, giving people the time to actually speak and also be heard is the stuff that works. I also think the big piece is explaining the why. And I think in a lot of leadership areas, particularly those who have not created a strategic vision or their purpose isn't clear, being able to explain the why, even if you're explaining the why of why it's not currently working or why we don't have a strategy yet, you know, being able to explain the why of where you are, I think it's a big part of that. What never works, my very least favorite way of leading people is command and control. And it feels like it works at times because people are too scared to do anything, too scared to speak up, too scared to do anything outside of the norm. But it doesn't last very long. You know, an employee in a command and control position will eventually leave, or will go and find somewhere else, or find something else to do. People think that that happens, but it doesn't happen short term. So, you know, whilst I know what you said, the question, you know, the biggest, like, what's the biggest bit? Why doesn't it work? That to me is probably the biggest, you know, indicator of that. And it's not easy. It's not easy to get anyone to change patterns or to become different. But as a leader, the more time you can spend with people and the more you understand where they come from, then your level of understanding about them and also their needs are being heard and are being met. You know, so many people, and I, in my own coaching career, ultimately in a lot of my client calls, I just listen to people, because a lot of people don't have that place to be heard. So providing that place to be heard is what will work. Is that a good enough answer to your question?
It's quite interesting. So obviously, just the immediate correlation there is what doesn't work is taking up all the space, and what does work is actually creating space.
Yeah, and it's a really big risk. You know, I want one of those big high risk stamps now across my face. Those. And I've had this experience myself, where I've kind of gone into a big job with the team and thought, oh, just get them all to do the work. And I took a step back and thought, actually, I'm just going to talk to them all, and I'm going to keep talking to them all, and I'm going to give them time. And what I found at the end of that kind of experiment, if you like, was that people kept coming to me saying, oh, I've got this really great idea for a project, or have you got something else that I can work on, rather than me having to stand there, you know, with the whip and tell everybody what to do all the time. So the more that they are heard, the more that they are acknowledged, and particularly acknowledged for being an independent thinker, or acknowledged for the fact that, you know, they're the numbers person, or they're the, you know, the one who picks up all the spelling. It doesn't matter what they are, but if you give them the space to be who they are, then it becomes a full place of where they actually want to give things back to you. It's like letting a cat roam free, you know, and then it brings in a dead bird and goes, here's my present. It's kind of that, but in a nicer way.
I enjoy the metaphor, maybe a little bit too much. So making this a little bit more transactional. So I am a TA manager. I have more work than ever on my desk because my team's been cut by 70% over the last 18 months. I've got kind of the HRD over here saying, but we've got to report on our diversity numbers. And I've got my hiring manager over here saying, I am sick and tired of you telling me these things. I just need someone yesterday. And now we've got all this new regulation coming in that's like, I need to keep everybody happy. What does that, how does that play? How does this defining purpose of vision, having the why, kind of active listening, when you've got that much pressure on your plate, how does it play out in that environment?
Well, I want to firstly pick up on something that you said, which is, you know, how do I make everyone happy? Because that ain't anyone's job.
Well, really important point to remember.
It's a nice outcome, but it's not our job, right?
Yeah.
And so and like you were saying with the consistency point, you know, there will always be issues where there is always too much to do. There's not enough time to do it, and the pressure is crazy. You know, people asking, but being able to be consistently, you know, firstly not phased by any of that. You know, kind of in a place where this is the environment that I work in. Am I able to change some stuff? Yes, no. If I'm not able to change some things, then what do I do for myself? You know, I often think about a kind of a tree trunk in a storm. You know, if the storm's going crazy and the branches and the leaves are all blowing over, the trunk remains the same, right? And that to me is where good leaders need to be. You know, it's not always possible to prevent showing that we're unhappy or really annoyed or any of those things. But if we can control our own responses to things and our own emotional maturity to be able to kind of go like, you know, that's rubbish, then what we project to other people is this confident base of, actually, you know, I know all of that stuff's happening. And in my experience, that I'm not saying it's easy, because you will always get the pressure, you'll always get it. But for me, and I, you know, I am a bit of a rule breaker on purpose. You know, I have always told my nieces and nephews, just break the rules, just see how far you can go, right?
My Sharon now lives in Malta. She's not allowed back into the UK.
That's right. They kicked me out. But I think so much of that is about our self-trust. I can trust myself in this position to be exactly what I need to be. If my vision and the vision of the organization and the purpose is very clear, this is how I'm going to do it.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's going to be thrilled with that, but that's okay too.
I think there's a point in here is the tree trunk that we need when we're under immense pressure can sometimes actually be the process. And that thing that says, I understand that you have this and you need this, but this is what we've all agreed. And that routing can be something that is not necessarily a feeling, or, you know, because the feelings are the vulnerabilities, right? That's the leaves that are sometimes there, they're sometimes not, the branches that are sometimes broken and then regrow. It's you know, as someone that is highly anchored to the value of a process, and actually exists in this universe by extensive process mapping. Sorry, everyone concerned. I find that those are the consistents. You know, so I always say, just like, this, the great thing about data is you can make whatever story you need, but ultimately data is absolute, whereas a lot of these other things are not.
Yeah, completely. And so we have to be, you know, the base that isn't going to fall at some point.
Yeah.
And you know, mind you, there are some days, yeah, sure, when the tree might feel like it's having a bit of flop, or it might feel like it needs to be chopped down. But that's staying strong in ourselves and staying strong in our core, our beliefs, our values, as you said. And yes, completely following the process. The process has saved my sanity time and time and time again, as well as driven me absolute stark raving mad, you know. But when the process works, and when you can think about adding in things like continuous improvement to make sure that that process is always growing, then yeah, they help for sure. For sure. And I'm not a linear person at all, so but I can still understand the importance of the process, Joseph.
Good to know. So processes work. It's good to have to tune into your emotional kind of need when you are trying to influence, but there are consistent mindset barriers, particularly around perception of value to enablement functions in businesses. So whether that be a marketing function, a people function, there are always going to be stakeholders that say, I know how to do your job better than you, therefore just shut up and do what I need. And actually, there's a huge problem with particularly talent acquisition, where 90% of the work is dictated to you. So when I am now from a place of feeling disempowered, I'm needing to kind of try and get people to work in a different kind of way. What are some of those mindset barriers that people have to strategic change, and how can I, as TA or a HR or talent professional, kind of use this to overcome them?
I mean, change is such a massive thing. You know, we now always hear all the time, you know, oh, change is constant, change is constant. Great, yeah, it is awesome. Doesn't make it any easier for us to bear, and particularly resistance to change, right? You know, so I've adopted quite a lot of change in my life. I've done it on purpose. When someone enforces it on me, that's very different feeling. You know, I'm open to change, I'm quite accessible to it. But if somebody makes me want to do something I don't want to do, then the first thing I'll do is resist. And just because I'm a bit of a rebel, but being able to have explanations of why, right? So that, again, this lack of understanding for why the need for change is. We need to be able to explain to people. We need to be honest. You know, I remember being in situations where I didn't know the whole story of what I was actually having to share with my team. So I said that to them. I don't know the whole story. I'm giving you everything I know. And there are, you know, and I will even say to people, there are some things that I know that I can't share with you. Because it gives a sense of, you know, okay, you know, I'll tell you everything I'm allowed to tell you and we can talk about it. But there are some things that I obviously know that I can't share with you. So again, that being vulnerable with people, but sharing you know, the understanding for why is such a big thing. We don't really cover it enough, you know. And I always say this to people, the biggest thing small children will ask you consistently is why. And they get to a point where their parent is like, enough, you know, and then we learn to stop asking why. And what we need to do is to be able to go back to that small child and consistently just keep it, yeah, but how come? But why? Because without that, we're not going to be able to accept why the change is coming. I think also not believing in the change yourself, right? So again, I've been in a situation where I've had to tell people, you know, oh, by the way, you're being taken over by another organization. Didn't like any of it, didn't believe in it, had to do it. That was my job. But I could be vulnerable enough to be able to say that, you know, creating that vision, working together, understanding the needs, but also giving people enough time to process the change. We can't just drop it on somebody and then say, right, okay, so, you know, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we all should be on the same page. Everyone's happy. No, I process it differently to you, to Kaylin, you know, to Pat, to anybody. The way we process change needs to be able to be, again, held in that space of, you know, it's okay if it takes you a couple of days or even a month. We can talk about it, we can support you, we can give you whatever you need to be able to, you know, absorb and take that change. And giving people a voice, you know.
Yeah.
This is how it impacts me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I think particularly when things are regulatory or kind of compliance related, I mean, or macro legal environment, there is always this perception of this, well, actually, of this is now what has to happen. And if you don't do that, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the way that we deliver that and kind of own those conversations has to be delivered in that way.
Exactly. It is so much about the delivery, you know, and it is so much about if we don't know any other information, we can share that we don't know any other information. You know, as a leader, obviously it would be our job to try and find out as much information as we possibly can to share with people. But if we don't know, we don't know, you know. And hopefully what that means is that people will be going like, okay.
Sounds like a really kind of proactive step that could be taken, particularly at this stage where we know change is coming, is those little kind of side of desk, hey, just so you know, this is inevitably going to be coming. I know we've had a couple of challenges around this in the past, but you know, we're working on something to make it easier so it doesn't, you know, so risk isn't on your doorstep. I'll keep you updated, but just really to let you know, those kind of moments are going to be in the run up to this change invaluable to being able to kind of get people on board.
Utterly. And things like curiosity, which again, you know, the why question, we don't ask enough. You know, being a leader, going up to somebody and saying, how are you going with this news? Or how are you feeling about this situation? You know, what's happening for you right now? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need to talk to anybody else about it? You know, being able to offer any resources, but being curious about how people are processing that change.
Because people will ultimately move in a sense direction when they trust it, right? And when they believe it's going to help them.
Yeah. And sometimes they have to, even if they don't believe it's going to help them, you know, sometimes we got to go in that stinky direction we don't want to go in, you know. But my experience of that is that it shares with us the ability to, you know, make a decision that we don't really like. It shares with us the change that it brings along, which is, you know, actually, if I don't like this, what else can I do? Or what else would I have done that wouldn't have been kind of thrust upon me before? So
understood.
They're not always bad things, even though they feel like it. Those lovely lessons we get from the universe, you know?
Frequent as they are. I'm going to stop dominating your time, Sharon, and ask if there are any questions.
A question has come up from Jess, which is about the law/legislation changes. So how can I support my organization with data to show costing, value, and outcomes or similar of having something start from the first day of employment versus after probation?
Okay, so this is a data question, so I'll pop on over.
Say that's not me.
Yeah, so within, it's going to have to be hypotheticals. So if you sit in a HR function and, without getting any personal or sensitive data, you could say to your HR team, what is the average discrimination-based or related settlement fee that we've had to pay as an organization over the last kind of 24 months? Or you could ask the internet what that is. And so if you are trying to, ultimately, so in the report that we've just put out, we have created an example economic case of how to structure a conversation with particularly finance that says we need to make sure that this isn't now going to be a TA problem. And typically speaking, we do see that HR teams are less proactive in responding to legislative change. The policies come into place, but the processes and the accountability structures don't. And so the risk of that TA as a function is that suddenly HR is going to have this new price ticket on their doorstep, and instead of that being pointed in the direction of the business, it will land on TA's doorstep. And so working with finance to understand what those kind of cost cases look like, being able to just from a legislation perspective say, so it's not so probation, even after probation, that's more of a kind of an internal legal term. So you increase the protections of that person under your employment after a probation period, but legally speaking, their employment rights don't kick in the UK, particularly until after 2 years. So even in the current probationary structure, the employment rights still are largely non-existent within that. So day one means that the employee's right to claim, to raise unfair dismissal, these kind of claims are possible. And so, and those are the things that you've got to prepare for. I'm quite certain, I'm still yet to see a single finance manager, head of accounts, who is not interested in working out what the actual kind of risk cost is to this based on current hiring churn rate in the organization. If in employee kind of exit interviews, there are consistent low scorings on job fit alignment, kind of satisfaction in role. That's the kind of data that I would be looking at in order to build that case. Most of the time, it's quite uncomfortable for organizations to look at that data in that way. But this is why we have pulled the report together, so it gives a list of indicators as to what those could be. What data you should be preparing to build those cases. Sorry, better way to end that sentence. Was that clear enough? I mean, lots of data is basically my answer to most things when it comes to building a business case.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, Joseph.
More data.
That's a
More
shock.
data.
I've got another question come through. So this one is from John. How does the new legislation relate to contracting and IR35? Do the new rules apply to this or not?
Oh, there are specific laws that are coming in around contracting. Off the top of my head, John, I can't recall. Not a lawyer, so have to always disclose that, this is obviously, we're not here offering legal advice. We are trying to do risk mitigation from the TA functions perspective. There are citations to the different legislation in the report. Dinny, could we grab a URL for the report and drop that into the chat just to make sure that it's there? I will have a little flick through, John, and see if there's anything I can pick out, but it'll have to be something I'll pick up after the conversation, because something that technically does constitute as legal advice. I would want to cite something as opposed to offer it as an answer myself.
Thank you.
Risk management in real time.
and vulnerability, because you're saying, I don't know, but I'll
Oh,
find out.
oh no, I know I'm not a lawyer. that comes loud and clear. I know I'm not a lawyer. Although I did start studying law. But no. Anyway. So I have just a kind of a practical question for you, Sharon. I think when I think about a couple of things, like if I was to want to add like a thing to my toolkit as a largely disempowered, highly stressed part of an organization that needs to suddenly try and get a load of people whipped into shape and do things in a way that doesn't hold my ass on the line. If I was to work on a skill, something, and this is not a how I report data thing. This is a like I'm going to need to start influencing. I'm going to need to start getting people in line. What would that look? What is it unfair to say what would that look like if I was to add one thing to my Batman utility belt? What would it be?
Your Batman utility belt. I want to see that. Have you got it on now?
Sharon, not in public.
Okay.
Vulnerable.
Show me later. Show me later. You're not going to be surprised to hear this, Joseph, because my answer to that is boundaries. Being able to set, well, just being able to set some very clear boundaries, again, around who you are, how you operate, allows you, again, to tell that consistent story of, you know, who you are, what you're like, you know, how consistent you are to everybody all the time. Without, you know, there's quite a lot to that, obviously, but there's a lot of, you know, not having expectations of people. And the biggest failure in that regard. So, you know, sometimes I always talk about things that I could share with other people and listen to myself occasionally. But yeah, you know, having great expectations of people, people pleasing or trying to make people happy, as we talked about before. You know, actually what we're trying to do is do the work and provide people a safe, comfortable place to do that in. I think that's, boundaries especially are the place that can help us from an emotional maturity perspective, where we don't then respond, you know, we don't react, we respond to people. You know, we're not panicked. We can be ourselves, but we can be in a place where we're comfortable and confident with what it is that we're sharing. So, and not make any excuses or apologies for it, you know?
Yeah. Is there, the question I want to ask is there an example of how that would play out in real time? Like what, like, if I was to set that boundary within the context of I am overworked, I'm undervalued, I'm stressed, but I want to set a boundary that helps me manage my hiring managers better. What could that boundary start manifesting as? Do you have an example of that?
Oh, I've got many. My favorite one is that, you know, I work within these hours in a day and I am contactable within these hours in a day. You know, I was watching something the other day, an interview with Malcolm Gladwell, and he was like, you know, people before the iPhone were introduced had just the easiest life ever, right? Because they were not contactable after 5 o'clock in the office, right? And so being able to have those boundaries around, you know, I will work for you and you will get however many 100% of me that there is, but it will start at this time and it will end at this time. So, you know, not just people pleasing to the point of we are robbing ourselves of our sanity, or we are robbing ourselves of the time it needs to get good sleep, to get good rest, you know, to feed ourselves well, to go to the loo, for God's sake. You know, so many people I know constantly on meetings and be just like, you know, oh, quick, I've got to go, like, you know, not even giving themselves time to go to the loo. So those kind of boundaries around how we work, particularly within other people, you know, getting a message for me at 9 o'clock at night just gets ignored. It doesn't happen until the morning.
Ouch.
because I have clear set boundaries, not only about when I stop working, but I have clear set boundaries around when I don't look at my phone, you know. So after 8 p.m. at night, That's it. My
Yeah.
Australian family and friends are very annoyed by that. However, that's just, they're one of my boundaries, and that's okay. They know how to contact me if something grim has really happened, and, you know, but if it's a message or whatever it is, then it can wait. You know, my calls like this, my do not disturb is on. You cannot get to me when I'm focusing on something else. So those kinds of boundaries that allow us to be who we are.
And they're okay.
And they are okay. And we don't have to apologize for it.
It's there's so much that I could go into always at any of those tangents, but I recognize we're at time, so I actually have to wrap up. And so I will just say firstly thank you for always sharing so honestly what people really need to hear. I think so much of the time that is, it's okay. You are allowed to feel that way. This is a stressful time. There are lots of things that will need to change, but you are capable of being able to do that if you have your tree trunk and are kind of, I guess, proactive. Proactive. Much of this stuff is proactive. It's kind of proactive, ultimately care, but it kind of like proactively ensuring that you're successful.
Yeah. You know, do 5 minutes to plan in the beginning of the day, 5 minutes to plan at the end of the day. Reflection, allowing ourselves the time it takes to just think for a minute.
100%. Jeff was a bit of a bastard today, but you know, I'm going to try him again in 2 weeks' time, and you know, this is how I think I should try that differently whilst it's fresh, and then you make sure you're set up for success the next time around.
Yep.
Period. Building trust with hiring managers. Focus on aligning expectations, establishing your tree trunk, establishing partnership through active listening, starting by understanding where they are coming from, motivations, challenges, needs, even if that need is just, I needed someone yesterday. Asking them why. One of my favorite things when we were doing the initial research around Clue, sitting with hiring managers, and they would say, well, they need to have, you know, around 10 to 15 years experience. We're like, why? And watching that inability to maneuver from that moment, and you're like, okay, let me help you with that why. Wonderful tooling in Clue that can help with that part of the conversation. But you know, we'll follow up with a video on some of the new functionality that we've just released into the product that can help with these conversations and starting those conversations. But ultimately, this seems actually to be significantly more human than maybe even I was considering it to be at the beginning of this conversation. Funny that how trust is a really human thing.
Isn't that weird?
Isn't it just? But yes.
Conversation about trust in AI. You know, it's a whole little world to go down.
Now that one I will happily have for hours.
Yes.
But thank you, Sharon. Sharon Clues. We will drop connection QR codes and URLs in relevant channels alongside the video. Thank you so much for joining us for the Clu'd Up Employers Club. You're a legend.
Well, it's been my absolute honor and pleasure. Thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you, and make sure you join us next month. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Bye.